Koinonia is a deep, heartfelt connection with brothers and sisters in faith and in the mission of proclaiming the risen Christ. And Luke speaks about it in these terms. He says, and they, this is the very early church, and they were of one heart, one mind, one soul, and one spirit. And they shared what they had in common. Isn't that a neat picture of what God might like our world to be? People of one heart, one mind, one soul, one faith, living in peace and harmony, sharing with each other. A magnificent thing. We have that. You don't get that in the Rotary Club. You don't get that by being on a ski team or a tennis team or being a member of the VFW. You get it when you're deeply involved in the mission and ministry that a parish conducts itself in. But then the 34th verse is the one that has always been intriguing to me. Listen carefully. Luke writes, and great grace was upon us. I find that so fascinating that he didn't just say, and grace was upon us. He had to put an adjective in front of it. And he said, great grace was upon us. He was saying that all of the gifts that God has to give that we can't give to ourselves, that we can never earn or become meritorious of, the reconciled relationship we have with God, the forgiveness of sins, life everlasting is simply given to us, lavished upon us, and there are two things that we're able to do. One is to receive, and the other is to give thanks. But Luke beefs it up, kicks it up a notch in how good God is. He says it is great grace. And I had a lot of fun. I went through 6 other translations. I was curious about this. One translation says abounding grace. One says overflowing grace. Another one says amazing grace. These gifts that God has for each and every one of us are so absolutely amazing. I want to give you just a little review of my 45 years of pastoral work, and all I want you to remember is that great grace has been upon me through the whole of Christian ministry. The first time that I started to discover great grace was before I was even out of seminary. I was a Young Life Club leader. We went on to high school campuses and we gathered kids. We made friends with kids. We'd get them together on Wednesday nights in somebody's living room. And we'd preach and teach the Bible. We'd sing a lot of stuff. It was great, but God's grace fell upon me at an Episcopal church. Can you imagine that? A 3-generation Lutheran in a Lutheran seminary getting ready for Lutheran ministry, and God chooses to bless me in an Episcopal congregation when I first laid eyes on Barbie. Stand up, Barb. 46 years ago. We had both come late to this prayer meeting, and we got stuck in a door jam. And the first sight we had of each other, we were peeking in prayer. Everybody's praying, their heads are bowed, eyes are closed. I caught her peeking at me. I think she caught me peeking at her. I can't tell you what it's been to have a partner for all these years of ministry. This was a gift of grace. We didn't know if the relationship could make it. We knew there was a great connection. Barbie's dream had been to become a dental hygienist, move, work, and have fun on the beaches in Southern California. And when she gets a dream, it's going to happen. I was at the mercy of the church to be sent out on internship. Had no choice with it. Here's a gift of great grace. Guess where I'm assigned? Long Beach, California. It let the relationship go. John and Rebecca, where are you guys right now? There they are. John was in my first college group, and John and Rebecca made a trip from San Luis Obispo to be with us today. This is really cool. But the calling and internship was to start a campus ministry from scratch at Cal State Long Beach, and then to be a part of a congregation. It was a marvelous year, but the most marvelous gift of great grace was we were married that year. Great affirmation was given because of the work that had been done by supervisors. They wanted us to stay on for a few years and put off finishing seminary and ordination, but we made the choice. We wanted to move on and see what God had, so we went back for another year of seminary. In the Lutheran Church, you're not ordained until a congregation calls you. And I can remember Barbie and I on our hands and knees praying to God, because the concentration of Lutheran churches is in northern Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. We had tasted the delights of California, and we were just so wanting to get back there. I came out of a class of about 180 students, and there were 4 that were chosen by a bishop to go to the West Coast. I was one of them. And the most amazing thing was, of the 4, I was the only one that was going to get a call right away. And this was really a different kind of call. I sat with the bishop, and he said, Mark, there's a small little parish in Pasadena, California, and they're going to call you, and we're going to need to help the church close. What? Our first worship service had only 15 people. They were the 15 people that did not realize that the church had already died. And they were walking around as zombies in the church. It was a 2-year call, and we were to usher the people into the neighboring Lutheran congregations. I thought, that's going to be pretty boring. I can't do that for 2 years. And so Barbie and I started visiting. We just started doing stuff we learned in Young Life. We'd hang out at school. When anybody new would show up at church, we'd be at their house on Sunday afternoon with a cake or cookies. They looked like a really cool couple. We'd bring a bottle of wine. If they were working people, it was a 6-pack of beer. And we just tell them how glad we were they came to church, and you want to come again. And it wasn't long that the 15 turned into 30, and the 30 turned into 60. Our chapel was exactly the size of our Vail chapel. And in under 2 years, we had 150 people gathered. And it was so fun. I'll never forget the day the bishop came to visit us, and he came in, and he was just, I thought I told you to close this church. You don't follow directions very well. We had a great time. God's grace upon us. But the greatest grace that came on us was the birth of our first daughter, Bethany. Stand up, say hi, would you? I'm not going to embarrass you. Our firstborn, coming into this world was pretty tough. Barbie had been through 14 and a half hours of labor. We were at the Huntington Memorial Hospital, great hospital in Pasadena, California. The doctors determined there was fetal distress, and we had to go into emergency cesarean section. The 2 labor room and delivery room nurses were members of my congregation, Jan and Chris. And we had done all the Lamaze stuff to let the dad be a part of the birth process. that went out the window, but Jan and Chris said, Mark, you're scrubbing up. You're going in with us. I wasn't quite ready for that, but I just followed direction pretty well. And I remember praying in that moment and wondering, I could come out of this room without a wife. I could come out of this room without a child. I could come out of this room without a wife and a child. And God's grace, great grace, was upon us. Bethany came out surgically and had 10 fingers, 10 toes, was just fine, and Barbie would recover. I remember, Bethany, holding you because Barbie couldn't, all wrapped up, and so very happy and grateful for the grace of God. And you know what the first thing my wife said to me when she came to? Mark, how are you? Great grace, just great grace. Our second call was a mission congregation. We went to Thousand Oaks, California. Beautiful rolling properties, about 10 miles inland from the coast, 60 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Most of our people were commuters, and we pretty much started a church from scratch, and it was fun. Lots of 30-some people. The grace of God was upon us, and God graced us with 2 more daughters. Jamie, stand up, middle daughter. Birthing was scheduled cesarean sections, and this was the Los Robles Hospital in Thousand Oaks, California. I will never forget, after the incision was made, be seated there, to see the hands with surgical gloves lifting that face out of her mother's body. I know what the Transfiguration must have looked like. There was a Shekinah, a glow of God, a radiance that I had never ever seen before and haven't seen since. And with all my daughters, it's the radiance of the inner glow of a relationship with Christ. Our third daughter, Angie, stand up there, was born in Thousand Oaks, California. Great grace given for Mark and Barbie in this ministry. And Angie's cesarean section birth was amazing. Barbie had almost a whooping cough. And can you imagine going in for lower abdominal surgery, almost having whooping cough? She was in inhalation therapy, but the time was to do it. She'd be in some inhalation therapy for some time after that. But I'll never forget seeing Angie lifted from her mother's body. She had a twinkle in her eye. And in her smile, there was a little mischievous crook. And so because I was the first one to hold all of our kids, she was all wrapped up tight in a little bundle. And they handed Angela to me. And by this time, I was really used to these cesareans. They were nothing. They were a piece of cake. Now for me, this is our third one, not for Barbie. But I'm holding this little bundle, just moments old. And all of a sudden, I start feeling wet and warm. Dad, I'm here, and I'm peeing on you. It was a great birth. But do you see why I was saying great grace has been upon me? To be a Southern California pastor was just exciting, lots of places to live. But if you had a chance to be a pastor in a beach town, it was remarkable. And God was at work preparing and equipping me for things that would come later. Our congregation in San Clemente, California had an elementary school. We had 120 kids. At that time, we had pretty significant budgets. $750,000 with the school and about $300,000 with the parish. But beach ministry was so fun. We had a blast. Surfing, boogie boarding, riding up and down the coast. But the greatest blessing that God ever gave to me in ministry was we were the closest church to the United States Marine Corps base, Camp Pendleton. And somehow as we ministered to the Marines in our church, it was fantastic. This was almost leading up to Desert Storm #1. We had 30, 40 Marine families that were part of our church. Our church took off as a military congregation when a guy that I had known before, who was a graduate of St. Olaf College, Colonel John Stenzer, moved to town. He became the commanding officer of the School of Infantry. And the first thing he did when he came to town was he looked me up and joined our church. When you got the colonel of the Marine Corps infantry as a member of your church, every major wants to suck up to the colonel. And we just exploded with military families. And it still is the highlight of my ministry. When our guys shipped out of San Diego for Desert Storm #1, I'd been in the homes of 30 or 40 of these Marine families. And as I would leave the home, the Marine would walk out with me to the car and he'd hand me an envelope. And they'd say to me, "Pastor Mark, do you know what this is?" Before the Marines went into any kind of life-threatening situation, they'd written a letter to their family. And they'd give the letter to somebody they trusted to deliver it, to read it, and to be with their family if they didn't come home. I've never held such important documents in my life. Fortunately, Desert Storm 1 didn't last long. Every one of our guys came home. It was a magnificent ministry. I remember writing sermons on the beach. Can you imagine this? Friday afternoons in a beach chair, big clipboard, and I would have this little talk with God. It was so fun. God, you must like me. How many pastors write their sermons on the beach? I don't ever want to go anywhere else. I just thank you for liking me so much. And we would always follow what we thought the calling was. And we left Southern California. It was really hard on the girls, but felt the call of God. And we had to do that. And great grace would be upon us in serving in Apple Valley, Minnesota. All three of my daughters were elite volleyball athletes. We had so much fun in their high school years, and then they all went on and actually did some college volleyball as well. But the most amazing thing happened in those years of ministry. One of our premier Lutheran churches, the 100th largest Lutheran church in the country, American Lutheran Church of Sun City, was in a pastoral search for a new senior pastor. We were visited and checked out and found out that I was one on a list of 60 potential candidates. When I heard that, I thought, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen. After all kinds of paperwork, interviews over the phone, so on and so forth, we were invited in February. Minnesota's awful in February. To go to Arizona for a 4-day interview. And so we went, thinking, well, at least we'll get warmed up, maybe get some sun tan. And found out after the interview there were 3 candidates. Barbie snuck into one of the manila file folders. And we're on the plane heading back out of Phoenix to St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Barbie said, "Mark, do you know there are 3 candidates?" And I said, "How'd you find that out?" Well, she had read this. One was a top-flight administrator in the ELCA and had been an associate pastor in some of the biggest churches in the country. The other was a missionary from Africa who was close to getting his PhD degree And then I said, Barbie, well, who's the third one? Just about jumped out of the airplane. It's you. It's you. I thought, man, this thing could happen. I'm the only one that's really a pastor. And it did. And we served in Sun City, Arizona for almost 8 years. Powerful ministry. I retired then. Our church was very large. We had an average weekend worship of 1,800. The church was about 2,000, maybe 2,500. Those were the tumultuous years within the ELCA in conversation as to how we would relate to gay, lesbian, homosexual people. We were also in the discussion of how we might interface with the Episcopal Church. Now, the toughest part of that ministry was, while we had a big congregation, I was the pastor of 40 retired Lutheran pastors. Some people might think that's pretty cool. It was a sheer pain. It was a sheer pain in you know what. And a group called Word Alone was formed, and they wanted to guide our church out of the denomination, and I wasn't about to do that. And we really, God had so equipped us. And I got street tough through all the ministry, and I had all the experience that was necessary for that place. We had a great time, but got tired, thought it'd be good to retire. The story really gets going good. And here's where great grace is. We came up here to ski for the winter. That's all. Came up in the pickup truck with a couple suitcases. No intention whatsoever hanging out or staying here. We really liked the area. But did a couple Sundays of supply preaching at our Lutheran church in Dillon. That was real fun. But then there was a call committee. And Rivers, just wave your thing in the air. I met Rivers Jardis and Chris, wave your hand in the air. They interviewed me at the Main Street Grill. Do you remember that? And I'd never been interviewed by a group of people that were drinking wine and having so much fun. And they invited me to be an interim pastor. God was saving the absolute best of His great grace. I mean, we so deeply fell in love with the people of Mount Holy Cross. I was so privileged to walk in the footsteps of Pastor Carl Walker, who had served that congregation so faithfully and effectively for, was it 14 years? 14 years. He'd done over 750 weddings in our community. While Carl and I weren't really twins at all, our ministries were really compatible. We just loved it. It was way too short. I wish it would have lasted a whole lot longer. Here's another thing of grace. We needed to be out of the parsonage. In the Lutheran church, that's the pastor's home. You call it a rectory. You know, I've never been able to get that. That sounds like a place where you raise chickens. A rectory. We had nowhere to go. Our places were all rented. It wasn't like we were destitute or going to be homeless. We had nowhere to go. And I saw Rob and Nancy. Just wave your hands in the air. Where's Nancy from the Beaver Creek Chapel? We're 2 weeks from not knowing what to do. And Nancy and Rob had served in the Beaver Creek Chapel. And Nancy engaged us. Would you and Barbie like to do this from November to May? You'll be the winter, and spring people will be the summer and fall. It took about 30 seconds to make the decision. Great grace upon us, God always watching after us. But the best was yet to come. Being a part of the interfaith ministry, we had an opportunity to, through the Vail Chapel, get acquainted with all the clergy. And I'll never forget my first kind of occasion meeting Father Brooks. I thought his name was Keith Brooks. Doesn't that sound better? Makes more sense, doesn't it? And so, we would talk, and I learned that he corrected me. No, Brooks. Stuart Keith. Is it the third?
Brooks.
Stuart Brooks. Yeah, I still don't have it. So impressed with the ministry, and the Lutheran Church and the Episcopalian Church had an arrangement. The arrangement is entitled "Call to Common Mission," and pastors could serve laterally with full benefit of our ordinations. Out of the clear blue, everything in my life and ministry has been a gift of sheer grace. And as we come to the conclusion, not of ministry or witness, but of regular congregational life, I just, the only thing I want to be remembered for is somebody whose God's great grace was upon, who wanted other people like yourselves to know how gracious and loving and wonderful God is. And as much as he likes me, he likes you as well. Blessings. I was going to goof around, but I don't want to get it too long with this Scottish-Norwegian thing. That's the only part I didn't like about being here, was working with two Scotsmen. I'm wrapping up with this. The harmony that we have had with our staff, and then the harmony that there's been as I've had the privilege to be with Deacon Steve, a guy with a true Christ heart, the blessing of being able to be with a priest that is so incredibly capable and has the love of Jesus in his heart, the passion to want you to have that love as well. The three amigos have had a great 5.5, 6 years together. I'll end with a little Norwegian Thanksgiving. My daughter just returned from Norway, where the men are really men, they don't wear kilts. I could give you many of those, but takk for alt. That's thanks for everything. Mange tusen takk. Many thousand thank yous.